But what I'm going to do is give you a gallop through London 2012 and then drill down into what it means for the retail industry, specifically looking at some aspects of fraud. So, I'm not a stranger to the retail sector myself. When my first job was actually working with my father at a corner shop, come off licence, come bakery, come post office. Then after that, I went to John Lewis Partnership and worked for Waitrose for 5 years before joining the police. So, first thing to say is that the safety and security operation for the Olympics is very much a partnership operation. It's not just the police, it's also LOCOG, the London Organising Committee for the Games. It's also the military and a host of other organisations, some permanent and some set up specifically for the Games. And it is a huge challenge that we have ahead of us. Some of these statistics you may well have seen before, but they still put me in awe when I consider just how large this particular sports day, as somebody called it, will be. If you put everything together in terms of numbers of events and lay them end to end, it would be best part of a year of sporting events. And that's all squeezed into what essentially is six weeks, with 2 weeks in between the Olympic and Paralympic Games. But in terms of numbers, over 9 million tickets, huge. The number of media and broadcasters attending, that's 21,000 accredited media and broadcasters. We expect double that number to come over who will be unaccredited. And as is always the case with media, they're looking for a unique story, looking for something to talk about, which may not be that positive in terms of the Games. In this part of the country, in London, you're looking at over 1 million visitors to the Olympic Games, and probably over the course of the Olympics, 5 million. But it's not just about London. Over 70% of the events will be happening in London, but as you can see from that particular slide, there's a number of venues all around the country that will actually be hosting the Games. The ones in yellow are the football stadiums, of which there are still tickets for, I understand. If you then overlay the number of training camps where teams will go and prepare for the Games, I've stopped updating this particular slide because there are so many now, there is very few parts of the country that won't see a training camp of some sort, and that has implications for safety and security as well as a number of other things. And then the final map is the one on the torch relay. The torch relay enters this country on the 18th of May and starts moving on the 19th of May down in the West Country at Land's End. And the ambition is to get it within an hour's journey for 95% of the population in the UK. And that includes going over to Northern Ireland, dipping into Southern Ireland, doing Guernsey, Jersey, Isle of Man, the Hebrides. And that's a 70-day journey, 8,000 runners, over best part of 8,000 miles. Now, this is the meat of the safety and security input. You will no doubt remember the day that the UK was awarded the Olympic Games and the celebrations that followed that particular day. And then the very next day we had 7/7, the London bombings, the worst terrorist incident on UK soil. Now, the chances are those two events were not connected, but in the eyes of the public, obviously one tainted the other. Therefore, safety and security planning had to raise a level as a result of that particular event. So we are now planning for a severe state of security, which gives us flexibility should the circumstances change in the run-up to the Games. However, the Games also gives an opportunity for a criminal element to take advantage of it. And the most obvious aspect of it is actually trying to get hold of one of the golden tickets to actually go and see London 2012. Now, I will go on to that later on in the presentation, but I just flag it up there as a risk that we are planning for. Also, when this slide was originally put together, that was before we had last year's events across the country in a situation of mass disorder. Now, whether or not we see similar events this year, we don't know. But what it has enabled the police to do is actually plan and put into practice some of the plans they already had for the Olympics about getting large numbers of officers around the country in a quick time, responding to incidents as they bubble up. Of course, we've still got the austerity issue within this country. That has got potential to bubble up as well. We know we may well see strikes. We know we may well see protests. And the Olympics does give an opportunity for anyone or any group to actually get their grievance heard on not just a national stage, but an international stage, particularly when you consider the torch relay coming past most people's doorsteps in the next month or so. We looked at non-malicious hazards, and there is an outside chance we might have a warm summer, so we're planning for that. Crowd management, I'll come on to in a moment, but as I say, 5 million people coming to London, to the UK will require special levels of logistics. And of course, we're very aware that having bid for the Olympics, we can't drop the ball. The eyes of the world will be on us, 4 billion people watching on television. So it's very important this country shows itself off in its best light. And then finally, the one that I'm quite often asked about is, do we have the police officers to do it? Well, the answer is very definitely yes, and I'll go on just to explain in a moment how we're actually dealing with that stretch on our resources. Okay, so very often it's mentioned that the Games will be the largest ever security and policing operation in peacetime. However, it's also the largest logistics operation. It's the largest catering operation, and it's just the largest sporting event that you can have. And also the Paralympics, which follows the Olympics, is the second largest. So there's a tremendous size issue to consider here when we're looking at planning for the Games. We know that the British Police Force has good experience in dealing with large events. Consider the Manchester Commonwealth Games, where we had over 1 million people actually visit the Games. The G8 Summit in Gleneagles, with over 14,000 officers deployed, and over 1 million visitors to the Royal Wedding last year. These are all events that have been properly dealt with and resourced by the British Policing Service. But because this is so huge, so large, we will be changing the way we operate. And what we'll be doing is we will be reducing or cutting annual leave for officers over the Games period. We'll be cutting all training opportunities during that period, using our volunteer officers and staff so that we will have more people on duty than ever before. 9,000 additional police officers in London during the busiest times, 12,000 across the country. And as I say, these are supplemented, as you will read in the paper, no doubt, by additional private security and military security. And the team I work for is a community relations team. 3 strategic objectives which I always manage to shoehorn into my presentations. The first one, giving communities a sense of control over how the games were going to affect them. Making sure that people don't feel they're victims to the games, that they have some opportunity to comment on how the games is going to change their life and plan for that change. The second one is to identify safety and security issues that come out of the games and make sure that those messages are actually given to the right audience in the right format. We've done a lot of work with groups that have suddenly popped up to protest about the way the games might impact on them. You have a group called No Go at the Greenwich Arena that don't want the equestrian events there. We've managed to negotiate with them, give them an opportunity to lawfully protest, and as a result we have a good relationship with them. You'll be aware that Occupy has recently looked on the Olympic Games as a legitimate target. We've had people at Leighton Marshes, had to deal with them slightly differently, but at the same time we are negotiating with them. And the third strategic objective for my team is to make sure where there are vulnerabilities within communities that they're not actually accentuated by the games coming to town. The example I normally give in this context is the fact that the month of Ramadan will be at the same time as the Olympics. We've been making sure that the communities are aware that we can plan to make sure that this doesn't impact on people's daily lives when they're praying, whether they're fasting. And this is for staff, athletes and visitors to the Games. Now, in terms of how is the Games going to give an opportunity for organised criminal gangs to make money, this was recognised very early on in the planning for the Games. And there's a team which is a Metropolitan police team but has a UK remit called the Operation Podium team. Some of you might already have heard of them, and this is the sort of stuff that they're involved in. As I said earlier, the real opportunities that we've seen so far have essentially been around buying either counterfeit tickets or just setting up websites to give the impression that you have tickets to sell. But the Operation Podium team has been involved in all these types of criminal activities and already has had over 184 arrests to date, charged against 84 people and 39 convicted for a range of crimes, but predominantly fraud. So if you do think you are looking at an organised criminal gang that is actually looking to target the Olympic economy, then Operation Podium are the people that will be helping you to combat that. Now, in the wider context, as I said, I'm from the community relations team, and businesses are a community in themselves. And in fact, since Christmas, the majority of the inputs that I've been given at events like this have been aimed at businesses. It appears, since 2012 has kind of rolled over the calendar, that businesses have really woken up to the risks and opportunities that the Olympic Games presents. So I would encourage all businesses to consider these questions that I've got up here. How could your business be impacted by the Games? Do your staff live or work near an Olympic venue, an Olympic route network, a torch relay site? Will they need to change their travel habits as a result? Can they work from home? Can they change shift patterns? And generally, how can you carry on your business as normal in what is a pretty extraordinary couple of weeks? I would recommend, if you haven't already looked at it and your business is based in London, or you deliver into London or out of London, you look at the Transport for London website, which is a particularly good resource for businesses trying to work out where the pinch points are going to be on the transport system. It gives a significant number of charts and maps that give you an hour-by-hour prediction of where the traffic is going to be it pedestrian or vehicle traffic. The other good resource will be the London 2012 website, which has a number of business-related pages which will help you begin to prepare for the Games. And certainly the kind of business surveys I've seen at the moment suggest that we're still talking less than 20% of businesses that are properly planning for the impact the Games might have on their day-to-day business. What can you do to mitigate the threat of terrorism during the Games? Well, as I said at the start, the threat of terrorism is always present. Will the Games increase the threat of terrorism? It's a question mark. There's no identified intelligence to suggest that the Games will be targeted. In my opinion, it's more likely to be targeted by protests, by domestic protests, than it is by terrorists. But the fact is, you need to protect your businesses and your staff, and to make sure your training is up to date, your risk assessment's up to date. And if you need additional training in the area of counter-terrorism, then speak to your local police service. They will provide that training free. Operation Griffin and a host of other products can be provided by local police forces to your staff and businesses. Will there be a potential for increase in crime during the Games? I'm actually a Surrey police officer on secondment to the Metropolitan Police, and Surrey, as you may know, is having the cycle race coming through Mole Valley and the kind of Surrey Hills. We had the test event last year where we had a proper international cycle race, and we found our crime actually dropped and was the lowest it's been for 3 years. All the evidence from places like Beijing and Vancouver do suggest that with the increased number of security and police officers around venues and events, that crime does reduce, but there is an element of displacement as well. And with those additional visitors coming to this country, people who may not be familiar with the area they're going to, there is always the opportunistic people that will look to commit crime, whether it be street robbery, pickpocketing, or that sort of thing. And then finally, what can you do to reduce the impact of crime upon your business during the Games? Well, this is really business as usual, just making sure that your staff have understood how things might change, an increase in foreign visitors, potentially an increase in credit card irregularities, ID documents being produced that your staff might not be familiar with, and people that won't necessarily be familiar with British law. So, we're counting down now. Less than a month to go until the torch lands in the UK. However, before that, as we know, we had the Diamond Jubilee, and my hope, certainly, is that the enthusiasm and excitement that we get from the Jubilee will carry on into the Olympics. As a police officer, I've been used to, for the best part of 30 years, dealing with bad news stories. So for me, it is a particular privilege to be involved in what I believe will be the good news story for 2012. And I hope that we can all look forward to a party of sport in a safe and secure environment this summer. Thank you for your time.